The first snow always came quietly to Pine Hollow. It didn't roar or rush, it drifted, soft and endless, like the sky had decided to fall apart piece by piece. Streetlights flickered through the white, and the wind carried the faint sound of distant chimes from an old church down the road. Inside a weathered cabin on the edge of town, Lena Hart sat motionless by the window. The kettle on the stove had gone cold long ago, but she hadn't moved. Her hands rested around a chipped mug of tea, the kind she made out of habit more than desire. She watched the snow blur the world outside, as if it could erase what had been. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed, lonely, mournful. Lena's eyes traced the frost crawling up the glass. She wasn't thinking of the storm. She was thinking of the sound that had never stopped replaying in her head. The sudden scream of tires, the crash, the shattering of glass, and the final silence that followed. 3 years. 3 long winters since she'd lost her husband in that wreck. 3 years since the doctors said she was lucky to survive. But luck, she had learned, could be cruel. She'd spent most of her days in the quiet, not because she loved solitude, but because it was the only place her pain didn't have to explain itself. The town thought she'd moved on, but inside she was still standing on that rain-slick road, breathing through the shards of a life that never fit together again. That night, the wind howled like something wounded. It rattled the windows, shook the door, and reminded her that the world outside could still be cruel. She rose from the chair, wrapped her blanket tighter, and whispered into the emptiness. "I'm still here, but I don't know why." Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. A low, broken whimper. Lena froze. It came again, barely audible beneath the storm. She stepped to the door, her heart pounding in the kind of rhythm she hadn't felt in years. When she opened it, the cold hit her like a wall. Snow whipped at her face. Through the haze, she saw a movement, a dark, trembling shape stumbling through the snowdrift. Then it collapsed. Lena ran. The figure was a dog, a German shepherd, ribs visible beneath his tangled fur, paws raw and bleeding. His breath came in ragged bursts, his body shaking with exhaustion. She knelt beside him, her voice cracking through the storm. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now." The dog's eyes met hers, glassy, feverish, but still alive. There was something in them she recognized instantly, the quiet will to keep fighting, even when the world has taken everything. Without thinking, she lifted him, half dragging, half carrying him inside. The heat from the old wood stove wrapped around them both. She wrapped him in her blanket, whispering over and over, "It's okay, you're safe now." The dog didn't move for hours. Lena worked through the night, warming water, cleaning his wounds, speaking softly like she used to when her husband came home from deployment. Her hands shook as she fed him broth from a spoon, his head resting on her lap. When the first light broke over the snow, the dog stirred. His eyes opened wider, amber and fierce beneath the scars. She smiled through tears she hadn't felt in years. "Hey there, brave boy." She named him Shadow, because he had come from nowhere, like a ghost that refused to die, and because she knew what it meant to live in the dark. Days turned to weeks. Shadow began to heal, slowly, painfully, the way broken souls always do. His ribs faded beneath warm meals, his fur softened beneath her care. He limped less with every sunrise, but what struck Lena most was the silence between them, the understanding that needed no words. He followed her everywhere. When she went to fetch firewood, he trailed close. When she cried in her sleep, he lay against her side until her breathing calmed. He never barked, never begged, he just stayed. Sometimes, Lena caught him staring out the window, always in the same direction, always with the same look. Something haunted lingered behind those eyes. She knew that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror. As winter melted into a reluctant spring, Lena began to step outside more. She fixed the old fence. She went into town for groceries. People noticed. "New dog?" the shopkeeper asked with a smile. Lena nodded, placing canned food on the counter. "He found me." And that was the truth. She hadn't saved him. They'd saved each other. For the first time in years, laughter found its way back into her voice. She walked taller, smiled easier. There were nights when she would sit by the fire and tell Shadow stories about the cabin, about the life she'd lost, about the dreams she'd buried under grief. Shadow listened like he understood every word. Then, one morning in early spring, a truck pulled into her driveway. Lena stepped outside, wiping her hands on her jeans. The man who got out wore a worn military jacket and eyes that had seen too much. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I'm sorry to bother you, but that dog, we've been looking for him for over a year." Her breath caught. "You know him?" The man nodded slowly. "Yeah, his name's Captain. He was a military K9, served with my brother. They were inseparable." His voice cracked slightly. "There was an ambush overseas. My brother didn't make it. The dog disappeared after the explosion. We thought he was gone too." Lena looked down at Shadow, Captain, standing beside her, muscles tense, eyes alert. The man knelt, whispering, "Hey, buddy, you made it home." Shadow hesitated, then stepped forward, resting his head gently against the man's chest. Lena felt tears sting her eyes. She knew what this meant. She knew that this dog, this soul who had kept her alive through winter, had belonged to another, to someone he'd loved and lost too. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "He's yours. I'll get his things." But the man shook his head. "No, ma'am, not anymore." He looked at her with a kind, heavy gaze. "He's bonded to you now. My brother would have wanted that." For a long moment, the three of them stood there, bound by grief, by loyalty, by love that refused to die. Finally, the man smiled faintly and saluted the dog. "Take care of her, Captain." Then he turned and left. Lena knelt beside Shadow, her hands trembling as she cupped his face. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" she whispered. The dog licked her cheek softly, as if to say, "So have you." That night, the fire burned bright in the cabin. Shadow lay at her feet, the steady rhythm of his breathing filling the room. Lena looked out at the snow beginning to fall again, soft, endless, forgiving. She thought about how strange life was, how survival sometimes meant finding each other in the ruins. Shadow stirred and laid his head on her lap. She ran her fingers through his fur, whispering, "We're okay now. We made it." Outside, the storm quieted. Inside, a heart that had once been frozen began to beat again, steady, certain, alive. And for the first time in years, Lena didn't whisper to the silence. She whispered to him. "Thank you for coming home." The snow fell lighter, like the world itself had exhaled. And in the hush that followed, Lena Hart finally understood, healing doesn't come when the pain disappears. It comes when you learn to love again, even when it still hurts. And in that cabin on the edge of Pine Hollow, beneath the soft hum of falling snow, two survivors found peace, not in forgetting what they'd lost, but in remembering they were never truly alone.
If this tale moved you, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more thrilling, emotional, and inspiring stories your way. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Do you believe dogs have an extraordinary sixth sense? Share your thoughts and personal stories with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.